My name is Sarah Taylor, and I am 28 years old. The day my mother abandoned me in the woods, leaving me alone with my wheelchair and a small bag, I thought my life was over. With partial paralysis from a childhood accident, I was helpless as she spat those final words at me. You were dead to me the moment you became useless. What neither of us knew was that someone was watching from between the trees. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and please subscribe to hear more stories of survival against all odds. I grew up in a small town in Michigan called Pinecrest, where everyone knew everyone. Our house was a modest 2-bedroom place on Maple Street with faded blue paint and a small porch where my father Richard would sit and read the newspaper every Sunday morning. Those are some of my fondest memories, sitting beside him as he explained current events to me in ways my young mind could understand. My father worked as an accountant at the local manufacturing plant, and though we were never wealthy, we had enough. My mother Patricia was different from my father in almost every way. Where he was patient and gentle, she was quick-tempered and demanding. Still, before everything changed, there were good moments. She would bake apple pies in the fall and taught me how to braid my hair. Sometimes she would take me shopping for new clothes at the start of each school year, making a whole day of it with lunch at the small diner downtown. Our family was relatively normal until I turned 12. That was when my father died suddenly from a heart attack. I remember the funeral, clearly standing beside my mother in a black dress that felt too tight, watching as they lowered his casket into the ground. Patricia squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt, but she did not cry. Not there anyway. I heard her later that night, sobbing in her bedroom with the door closed. After my father died, something inside my mother changed. The warmth that occasionally broke through her stern exterior disappeared entirely. She started working longer hours at the hospital where she was a receptionist, leaving me alone more often. I learned to cook simple meals, do my own laundry, and essentially take care of myself. I was managing pretty well for a 12-year-old, but I missed my father terribly. Then came the accident when I was 14. I was riding in my friend Jennifer's older brother's car. His name was Tyler, and he had just gotten his license. We were going to the mall, and Tyler was showing off driving too fast on a curvy road. He lost control and the car slammed into a tree. Jennifer had minor injuries. Tyler broke his arm. I was sitting in the back seat directly where the impact occurred. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later to learn that my spinal cord had been damaged. The doctors explained that I had partial paralysis affecting my legs. I would need extensive physical therapy, and while I might regain some mobility, I would likely need a wheelchair for the rest of my life. My mother was there when I woke up, her face drawn and pale. She held my hand and told me everything would be okay, but I saw something in her eyes that scared me. It was not just worry or sadness, it was resentment. The first year after the accident was the hardest. I had to relearn basic skills, adjust to using a wheelchair, and deal with the knowledge that my life would never be the same. The medical bills piled up, even with insurance. Our house needed modifications to accommodate my wheelchair, further straining our already tight finances. Patricia began drinking more heavily. At first, it was just a glass of wine with dinner, then a whole bottle. Eventually, she moved on to vodka, which she would pour into her coffee mug in the mornings before work. She tried to hide it, but I could smell it on her breath, see it in her unsteady movements. You know how much these medical bills are costing me, she would slur when particularly drunk. Your father left us with nothing, and now this. How am I supposed to manage? I tried my best to be less of a burden. I excelled in school, hoping that academic success might make her proud. I applied for every scholarship I could find, dreaming of college as an escape. I helped around the house as much as possible, cooking meals when she worked late, doing laundry from my wheelchair, keeping my room immaculate. None of it was enough. Patricia's resentment grew with each passing year. When I was 17, she met Kyle at the hospital where she worked. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative, tall and charming in a superficial way. He took her to fancy restaurants and bought her expensive gifts. For a while, she seemed happier, and I dared to hope things might improve. Then, Kyle started coming to our house more often, and I quickly realized he saw me as an inconvenience. He would whisper to Patricia when he thought I could not hear, asking why she still had to deal with this. He would suggest care facilities, group homes, any place that wasn't where he wanted to be with my mother. High school was difficult with my disability. Many of my former friends drifted away uncomfortable with my condition or unsure how to act around me. The school had to install a ramp at the main entrance and an elevator to allow me to access different floors. I felt like a burden there too, seeing the annoyed faces of administrators dealing with the problem I represented. Jennifer remained my only true friend. She never treated me differently after the accident. She would come over after school, help me with things I struggled to reach, and most importantly, she would listen when I needed to talk. Without her, those years would have been unbearable. Despite everything, I clung to my dream of becoming a writer. Words were my escape, the one thing my disability could not take from me. I filled notebooks with stories and poems, created worlds where I could run and dance and climb mountains. My English teacher, Mrs. Wilson, encouraged this passion, submitting my work to young writers' competitions and helping me apply to college programs with strong creative writing departments. When I turned 21, things at home reached a breaking point. Patricia had been laid off from the hospital after too many absences and mistakes, likely due to her drinking. Kyle had moved in, bringing his expensive tastes and constant complaints about the small house. The tension was constant, thick enough to choke on. "Do you know what my life could have been without you dragging me down?" Patricia asked one night, glass in hand, eyes unfocused. "I could have traveled, had a career. Instead, I am stuck in this town, taking care of a burden that will never go away." Her words cut deep, but by then I had heard variations of this sentiment so many times that I had almost grown numb to it. Almost. Some small part of me still hoped that somewhere beneath the alcohol and bitterness, my mother still loved me. That hope, however, misguided, kept me going through those dark days. I had no idea just how dark things would soon become. It was a Tuesday morning when Patricia announced she and Kyle were moving to Florida. She mentioned it casually over breakfast, as if discussing a change in the weather rather than a complete upheaval of our lives. "Kyle got a promotion," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, which I suspected was mostly vodka. "The position is in Tampa. Better salary, company car, the works. We are leaving at the end of the month." I asked, my heart racing with sudden hope. A fresh start somewhere new sounded wonderful. Maybe in Florida, away from the painful memories of this house, our relationship could improve. Patricia did not answer directly, just hummed noncommittally and changed the subject. I took her silence as confirmation and allowed myself to feel excited. That afternoon, I began researching universities in Florida with good English programs and wheelchair accessibility. I looked up support groups for people with disabilities in Tampa, imagining myself making new friends who understood my challenges. I even started packing carefully, wrapping the framed photo of my father and me at the lake, boxing up my collection of books, sorting through clothes to decide what would be practical in a warmer climate. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful. 3 days later, I overheard Patricia and Kyle talking in the kitchen. I had wheeled myself quietly down the hall, planning to get a glass of water, when their voices drifted out, making me pause. "We need to decide what to do about the Sarah problem," Kyle was saying, his voice low but clear. "That care facility I mentioned has an opening next month. We should book it before someone else takes the spot." "I know," Patricia sighed. "I just have not figured out how to tell her yet. She seems to think she is coming with us." "That was never the plan," Kyle replied, a note of irritation in his voice. "You promised me a fresh start, Patricia. That means just the two of us." I wheeled myself back to my room as silently as possible, my hands shaking on the wheels. The care facility, the Sarah problem, the casual way they discussed discarding me like unwanted furniture made me physically ill. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. The next day, Patricia sat me down in the living room. Kyle was not there, conveniently out on business. She explained in a detached voice that they had found a very nice residential care facility in Michigan, where I would be well looked after while they moved to Florida. "It is for the best, Sarah," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You need specialized care that I simply cannot provide. The staff there are trained professionals." "I do not need a facility," I protested, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I am largely independent. I can cook, clean, take care of myself. I could get a part-time job in Florida, maybe take some college classes. Please do not leave me behind." "The decision has been made," she said firmly, but then her expression softened slightly at whatever she saw in my face. "Look, let me think about it, okay? Maybe we can figure something else out. No promises." That slight hesitation gave me hope again, however fragile. Perhaps she was reconsidering, remembering that I was her daughter, not just a burden to be abandoned. For the next few days, I was on my absolute best behavior. I cooked elaborate dinners, cleaned the house until it sparkled, and never complained about anything, no matter how much my back ached from the exertion. Surprisingly, Patricia's attitude toward me seemed to improve. She stopped making snide comments about my disability. She asked about my writing projects with what appeared to be genuine interest. She even suggested we watch a movie together one evening, something we had not done in years. A week before the planned move, I noticed Patricia gathering my medications, organizing them in a small travel case. My heart leapt. This had to mean I was going with them after all. Why else would she be packing my prescriptions? "Are these all your current medications?" she asked, reading the labels carefully. "Yes," I answered, unable to keep the smile from my face. "The pain reliever, the muscle relaxant, and the anti-inflammatory. Do I need to get refills before we leave?" "That would be good," she nodded, not correcting my assumption that I would be going to Florida. Better to have extra just in case. The night before our supposed departure, Patricia made my favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread, the way my father used to make it. We ate together at the dining table with Kyle conspicuously absent. She even opened a bottle of wine, pouring a small glass for me. "To new beginnings," she toasted, clinking her glass against mine. I sipped the wine, feeling warm and cautiously optimistic. Maybe things really were going to change for the better. After dinner, while Patricia was in the shower, I went looking for the contact information for our new place in Florida. I wanted to research the neighborhood, see what was within wheeling distance, maybe find nearby coffee shops where I could write. I checked the stack of papers on the kitchen counter, careful not to disturb anything too obviously. What I found instead chilled me to the bone. Receipts from a pawn shop. My mother had been selling my possessions, things I thought were carefully packed for the move. My laptop. My father's watch that I had kept after he died. Even my grandmother's pearl necklace that was supposed to be my inheritance. I was still staring at the receipts when my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Something feels wrong about all this," she had written. "Kyle was at the bar tonight talking about Europe, not Florida. Be careful, Sarah. Call me if you need anything." Europe. My hands grew cold. I remembered Kyle mentioning Barcelona once, saying it was his dream destination. I had assumed it was just talk, the kind of place people mention wanting to visit someday. But now, with the sold possessions and the secretive conversations, a terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. I did not sleep that night, my thoughts racing with possibilities, each more frightening than the last. Moving day arrived with deceptive normalcy. Patricia seemed unusually cheerful as she helped me get dressed and into my wheelchair. She had laid out comfortable clothes for me, loose pants and a warm sweater despite the mild spring weather. "It might get chilly where we are going," she explained when I questioned the heavy clothing. Better to be prepared. My belongings, what remained of them, had been condensed into a single small suitcase. When I asked about the rest of my things, Patricia vaguely mentioned they had been shipped ahead to Florida. The lie came so easily to her that I might have believed it if not for the pawn shop receipts I had found. Kyle arrived with the rental car, a nondescript sedan with plenty of trunk space. He barely acknowledged me as he loaded the luggage. I noticed only 2 large suitcases besides my small one. For a permanent move, they were traveling remarkably light. "Where is all your stuff?" I asked Patricia as she wheeled me toward the car. "We sold most of it," she replied smoothly. "Easier to buy new things in Florida than to transport everything. Kyle's company is providing a furnished apartment for the first month." She helped me into the back seat of the car, folding my wheelchair with practiced efficiency and stowing it in the trunk. Kyle got behind the wheel, and Patricia sat beside him in the passenger seat. As we pulled away from the house, I took one last look at the only home I had ever known, wondering if I would ever see it again. "We are taking the scenic route," Patricia announced as Kyle turned onto a highway heading west, not south, toward Florida. "Thought we would enjoy the drive, make a little road trip of it." I wanted to point out that west was the wrong direction, but something told me to keep quiet. The atmosphere in the car was strange, tense beneath the forced cheerfulness. Kyle and Patricia exchanged looks I could not interpret, speaking to each other in hushed tones when they thought I was not paying attention. About an hour into the drive, Patricia handed me a bottle of water. "You should stay hydrated," she said, "and take your medicine. It is going to be a long trip." The water tasted slightly bitter, but I was thirsty and drank it anyway. She watched in the rearview mirror until I had swallowed my pills. Within 30 minutes, an unusual drowsiness began to wash over me. The landscape outside the window blurred, and my thoughts became foggy. I tried to fight the sensation, pinching my arm to stay alert, but the lethargy was overwhelming. "Mom," I slurred. "I feel strange. What was in that water?" "Just rest, Sarah," she replied, her voice sounding distant. "We have a long way to go." I drifted in and out of consciousness for what felt like hours. Occasionally, I would surface enough to register that we were on increasingly remote roads, the houses and businesses growing sparse, until there was nothing but dense forest on either side. We were definitely not heading to any airport or interstate that would take us to Florida. When I finally managed to shake off some of the drowsiness, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The car had slowed now, bumping along what appeared to be a dirt logging road. Dense pine forest surrounded us on all sides with no signs of civilization. "Where are we?" I asked, my tongue feeling thick in my mouth. "This is not the way to Florida." "No, it is not," Patricia agreed, turning to look at me with cold eyes I barely recognized. "Kyle is not here because he is waiting at the airport. Our flight to Barcelona leaves tonight." "Barcelona?" I echoed, confusion and fear building inside me. "What about me? I thought we were all going to Florida." Patricia laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You actually believed that?" "No, Sarah. Kyle and I are starting a new life in Europe. Without you." The car came to a stop in a small clearing just off the logging road. Patricia got out and opened my door. The cool air helped clear my head a little, bringing with it the realization of what was happening. "Get out," she ordered. "I cannot without my wheelchair," I reminded her, still hoping this was some kind of twisted joke or test. With efficient movements, she retrieved my wheelchair from the trunk, unfolded it, and positioned it beside the car door. Then she roughly helped me into it, her fingers digging into my arms hard enough to leave bruises. Next came my small suitcase, which she dropped unceremoniously in my lap. "Mom, please," I begged, tears beginning to stream down my face. "You cannot leave me here. We are in the middle of nowhere. I will not survive." "That is not my problem anymore," she replied, stepping back toward the car. "I have spent 13 years of my life caring for you after your accident. 13 years of doctor appointments, medications, special accommodations. 13 years watching my life shrink to nothing but being your caretaker. I never asked for the accident to happen, I cried. I never wanted to be a burden. But you were, she snapped. Every single day you were a burden. Do you know how much money you have cost me? The career opportunities I had to turn down because I could not relocate with a disabled daughter? The men who lost interest when they learned about you, Kyle, is the first one who offered a solution. Abandoning me in the woods is a solution, I asked, incredulous, despite my terror. This is attempted murder, Mom. You will go to prison for this. She smiled then, a cold expression that sent shivers down my spine. No one knows we are here. No one will find you in time. And by tomorrow, Kyle and I will be in Europe, with new identities. He has connections, you know. Very useful connections. Please, I whispered, reaching for her hand. I am your daughter. You cannot do this. She yanked her hand away as if my touch burned. You were dead to me the moment you became useless, she hissed. I should have done this years ago. With that, she got back into the car, started the engine, and began to turn around. I screamed and pleaded, wheeling myself toward the car in a desperate attempt to stop her, but the soft forest floor made movement difficult. My wheels sank into the pine needles and dirt, barely advancing despite my frantic efforts. The last thing I saw was the red glow of taillights disappearing down the logging road, leaving me alone in the gathering darkness of the forest. My mother had not looked back even once. For several minutes after the sound of the car faded, I sat frozen in disbelief. This could not be happening. My own mother could not have just abandoned me disabled and alone in the middle of a forest with night approaching. It had to be a terrible dream, a nightmare from which I would soon awaken. But the bite of the cool air against my tear-streaked face was undeniably real. So was the eerie silence of the forest, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of birds settling in for the night. This was happening. This was real. Panic surged through me like an electrical current. I screamed for help until my throat was raw, knowing even as I did that there was no one to hear me. We had driven for hours on increasingly isolated roads. The nearest person could be miles away. I checked my phone, clinging to a desperate hope. No signal. Of course there was no signal here, and the battery was already down to 15%, likely drained from searching for non-existent cell towers. I turned it off to preserve what little power remained, in case I somehow found my way to a place with reception. Reality began to set in hard and cold as the ground beneath my wheels. I was going to die here. That had been Patricia's plan all along. Leave me in the wilderness where my disability made survival nearly impossible, where exposure or predators would finish what she had started. I refused to accept that fate. I would not let her win. I examined my surroundings more carefully, forcing myself to think practically. The clearing was small, maybe 30 feet across, surrounded by dense pine forest. The logging road Patricia had driven down was narrow but relatively flat. It had to lead somewhere eventually. Civilization, or at least a main road where I might find help. I turned my wheelchair toward the road and began to push. Immediately, I encountered the first of many obstacles. The ground was uneven, covered with pine needles, small rocks, and exposed roots that caught my wheels. Each foot of progress required tremendous effort, my arms burning with exertion. The lingering effects of whatever drug Patricia had given me did not help. My coordination was off, my thoughts still slightly fuzzy around the edges. But determination drove me forward inch by painful inch. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, I had managed to travel maybe a quarter mile down the logging road. Night was falling rapidly now, the forest darkening around me. The temperature dropped noticeably, and I was grateful for the warm sweater Patricia had provided, her one act of mercy in this cruel abandonment. Then it began to rain. Not a gentle spring shower, but a steady cold downpour that soaked through my clothes within minutes. My wheels began to slip in the mud, making progress even more difficult. My hands, never particularly strong due to years of limited physical activity, were bleeding from the effort of gripping and pushing the wheels. I needed shelter. The forest offered little protection from the rain, the pine canopy too high and sparse to block much water. I scanned the area desperately, looking for anything: a fallen log, an outcropping of rock, anything that might offer some cover. There, just off the road, was a massive pine that had partially fallen its trunk, creating a slight overhang where it leaned against another tree. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. I forced my wheelchair through the underbrush toward it, branches scratching my face and hands as I pushed through. The space beneath the fallen trunk was tight, but I managed to position myself so that at least my upper body was somewhat protected from the rain. I pulled my small suitcase close, hoping Patricia had at least left me with some useful supplies. The contents were pathetically inadequate: a change of clothes, my medications, a small bottle of water, a granola bar, and a thin blanket. No flashlight, no first aid kit. Nothing that would truly help me survive in the wilderness. She had packed just enough to maintain the pretense that we were traveling, nothing more. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, though it was already damp from the rain. My legs, always problematic due to my partial paralysis, were beginning to spasm painfully in the cold. I massaged them as best I could, knowing that circulation problems could become dangerous quickly in these conditions. As full darkness descended, the forest transformed into something from a nightmare. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow concealing potential threats. Was that the howl of a wolf in the distance? Did bears inhabit these woods? I had no idea where exactly we were, what region, or even what state. Patricia had made sure I was unconscious for most of the journey. The rain continued relentlessly, and soon I was shivering uncontrollably. Hypothermia was a real risk, I knew. The symptoms would start with shivering, then confusion, then lethargy. After that, things would get much worse very quickly. I thought of my father, wondering what he would say if he could see me now. He had always encouraged me to be strong, to find solutions rather than dwell on problems. "You are smarter than any situation you will face," he used to tell me. I clung to those words now, trying to channel his practical optimism. Memories flooded back of the mother Patricia had once been before my accident, before my father died. She had sung to me when I had nightmares, bandaged my scraped knees, after falls, beamed with pride at school performances. How had that woman transformed into the monster who had left me here to die? A sudden movement in the darkness snapped me back to the present. Something was out there, moving between the trees. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to see through the rain and shadows. A deer, perhaps, or something more dangerous. The strange sensation of being watched crept over me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I peered into the darkness. Was it just my imagination, the product of fear and isolation? Or was there really someone observing me from the shadows? "Hello," I called out, my voice weak and trembling. "Is anyone there? Please, I need help." No response came except the steady patter of rain and the moaning of wind through the trees. Yet the feeling persisted, an almost tangible weight of unseen eyes upon me. My wheelchair had become stuck in the soft ground beneath the fallen tree. When I tried to move it, the wheels only sank deeper into the mud. With a surge of panic, I realized I was effectively trapped here, unable to seek better shelter, even if I found the strength to continue. In desperation, I attempted to pull myself from the chair, thinking perhaps I could drag myself along the ground, find somewhere drier, somewhere safer, but my partially paralyzed legs made this nearly impossible. I managed to shift only a few inches before collapsing back into the wheelchair, exhausted and in pain. The rain eventually stopped, but the damage was done. I was soaked through, my body temperature dropping dangerously. The woods dripped around me, an endless chorus of water falling from leaves and branches. My teeth chattered uncontrollably, and my thoughts began to grow sluggish, a sure sign of advancing hypothermia. I fumbled with my suitcase, pulling out the spare clothes, which were thankfully still mostly dry in the center of the bundle. With clumsy, numbed fingers, I layered them over my wet garments, knowing it was not ideal but better than nothing. As the night wore on, I drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time I jerked awake, momentarily confused about where I was, only to have the horrible reality crash back. My mother had left me here to die, had planned my death with cold precision. The realization hurt more than the cold, more than the physical pain of my condition. The forest at night was alive with sounds, each more terrifying than the last. Rustling in the underbrush, cracking branches, distant howls. I imagined all manner of predators circling, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. Yet beneath the fear, a tiny spark of defiance remained. I would not die here. I would not give Patricia the satisfaction. Somehow I would survive until morning, and then find a way out of these woods back to civilization. I would expose what she had done, ensure she faced justice for her cruelty. With that resolution burning in my heart, I huddled deeper into my makeshift shelter, willing the long night to pass quickly. The last thing I remember before exhaustion claimed me was that persistent feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes monitoring my struggle from the darkness between the trees. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled me from a fitful sleep. Dawn had broken, pale light filtering through the trees, illuminating the mist that rose from the damp forest floor. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming, my mind conjuring rescue in my final hours. "Hello, are you okay?" A male voice, deep and concerned, called from nearby. I tried to respond, but my throat was too dry, my voice emerging as little more than a croak. I coughed and tried again. Here I managed the word, barely audible. "I am here." The footsteps quickened, and suddenly a man appeared from between the trees. He was tall, with broad shoulders, dressed in practical outdoor gear, a camera hanging from a strap around his neck. His expression shifted from concern to shock as he took in my condition, the wheelchair, my obviously distressed state. "My God," he breathed, rushing toward me. "You need help." He knelt beside my wheelchair, his movements careful, as if trying not to startle me. I flinched away, instinctively, fear of strangers, deeply ingrained after what Patricia had done. "It is okay," he said, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "My name is Michael Gardner. I am a wildlife photographer. I have a cabin about 2 miles from here. Let me help you." "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice still weak but strengthening slightly. Michael's expression changed, something dark passing behind his eyes. "I saw what happened yesterday. I was photographing birds about 50 yards from the clearing when the car stopped. I saw that woman leave you here." "You saw—" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "You witnessed my mother abandoning me." He nodded grimly. I could not believe what I was seeing at first. I documented everything with my telephoto lens, took pictures of the car, the license plate, the woman. I called the state police immediately, but by the time I finished the call, the car was gone and a storm was moving in. "I tried to reach you last night, but the terrain is treacherous in the dark, especially with the rain. I would have risked both our safety." "You have pictures?" I asked, hope rising within me for the first time since this nightmare began. "Proof of what she did." "Yes," Michael confirmed, pulling out a small digital camera from his pocket. He turned it on and showed me the screen. There, in sharp detail, was Patricia dragging me from the car, throwing my wheelchair onto the ground, her face contorted with cold determination as she left me behind. Tears filled my eyes, a complex mixture of relief at having evidence and pain at seeing my mother's betrayal so clearly documented. "She drugged me," I explained. "She and her boyfriend planned to abandon me here and flee to Europe." Michael's jaw tightened with anger. The police are searching for her. I gave them all the information last night. Now let us get you somewhere warm and safe. You need medical attention. He assessed my situation quickly, noting how my wheelchair was stuck in the mud. With gentle efficiency, he lifted me from the chair, cradling me against his chest. I was too weak to protest, and honestly, the warmth of human contact after the terrifying night alone was indescribably comforting. I will come back for your wheelchair. Once you are safe, he promised, carefully navigating through the trees with me in his arms. My cabin is not far, and I have a satellite phone there to call for emergency services. As he carried me through the forest, Michael explained more about himself. He was 32, a professional wildlife photographer who specialized in documenting endangered species. The cabin was his base for a 3-month project photographing the recovery of local wolf populations. I have a sister with multiple sclerosis, he told me, as we made our way along a narrow trail. When I saw what was happening in that clearing, I recognized immediately that you had a disability. I could not believe someone would leave a person in your condition in the wilderness like that. The cabin, when we reached it, was small but well equipped. A generator provided electricity and a wood stove radiated welcome heat throughout the single-room space. Michael set me gently on a small couch covered with a thick quilt, then immediately set about making hot tea and finding dried clothes I could change into. These will be too big, he apologized, offering a flannel shirt and sweatpants. But they are warm and dry. I will step outside while you change. Call when you are ready. Once I had changed and wrapped myself in the quilt, Michael returned with the tea and a first aid kit. He treated the cuts and scratches on my hands and face with gentle competence, his touch clinical but kind. The police should be here soon, he said, checking his watch. I gave them the coordinates of my cabin. There is a logging road that comes within a 1/4 mile of here, so they should be able to reach us without too much difficulty. As we waited, Michael showed me more of the photographs he had taken. Not just of Patricia's cruel abandonment, but beautiful images of the forest and its inhabitants. Wolves with intelligent eyes, deer moving gracefully through meadows, birds in flight against vibrant sunsets. His talent was obvious, his passion for nature evident in every shot. Your work is amazing, I said, the warmth and tea beginning to restore some of my strength. You capture so much life and emotion. Thank you, he smiled. Photography helps me see the world differently, find beauty in unexpected places. Speaking of which, may I ask your name? In all the chaos, I realized I never properly introduced myself. Sarah, I replied. Sarah Taylor. Well, Sarah Taylor, he said, his kind eyes meeting mine. You are incredibly brave. Many people would have given up in your situation, but you survived. That takes remarkable strength. Before I could respond, the distant sound of vehicles reached us. Michael went to the window, then nodded. The police are here. And an ambulance, too, it looks like. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Paramedics checked my condition, treating me for mild hypothermia and exposure. Police officers took my statement, photographing my injuries and recording every detail of Patricia's actions. One officer, a woman named Detective Lindsay, showed particular interest in the case. We have apprehended your mother and her boyfriend, she informed me, her expression professionally neutral but with underlying compassion. They were arrested at Detroit Metropolitan Airport, attempting to board a flight to Madrid with connecting service to Barcelona. She really was leaving the country. I breathed the reality of how close Patricia had come to escaping justice, hitting me hard. They had one-way tickets, new passports under different names, and nearly $50,000 in cash, Detective Lindsay continued. This was clearly premeditated. With Mr. Gardner's photographs and your testimony, they will be facing serious charges, including attempted murder and abandonment of a vulnerable adult. The news should have brought relief, but instead I felt suddenly overwhelmed. Tears came unbidden and I could not stop them. Michael quietly excused himself, giving me privacy with the detective as the emotional dam finally broke. "It is okay to feel whatever you are feeling right now," Detective Lindsay said, handing me a tissue. "What happened to you is unimaginable, but you survived, and we will make sure justice is served." After the initial statements were taken and my immediate medical needs addressed, I was transported to the nearest hospital for more thorough examination. Michael promised to retrieve my wheelchair and suitcase, and to visit me in the hospital once I was settled. The next few days passed in a blur of medical tests, police interviews, and visits from social workers, trying to help me navigate this sudden upheaval in my life. I learned that we had been in northern Michigan, about 5 hours from my hometown. Patricia had driven in circles for hours while I was drugged, likely to confuse me about our location if I regained consciousness during the trip. News of my abandonment had leaked to the media, creating a surge of public interest in the case. Headlines screamed about the heartless mother who had left her disabled daughter to die in the wilderness. Reporters called the hospital trying to get interviews, which the staff firmly declined on my behalf. The attention was uncomfortable, but it also brought unexpected support. Jennifer, my friend from home, arrived at the hospital with tears in her eyes and fierce determination to help me recover. She had seen the news and immediately made the 3-hour drive to be by my side. "I knew something was wrong," she said, hugging me carefully around the IV lines and monitoring equipment. "I should have done more, called someone when I heard Kyle talking about Europe." "You warned me," I assured her. "You did what you could. No one could have predicted how far they would go." Michael visited daily, bringing small gifts to brighten the sterile hospital room, flowers, or books or photographs he thought I might enjoy. His quiet presence was comforting, his conversation, a welcome distraction from the trauma I was processing. "The wolves I was photographing have a strong sense of family," he told me during one visit. "They protect their vulnerable pack members at all costs. It is a shame some humans have not evolved to that level of compassion." As my physical condition stabilized, the question of where I would go after discharge became pressing. My home was gone, sold by Patricia before our move. I had no family, no savings, and my disability made finding immediate housing and employment challenging. Michael surprised me with an unexpected solution. "I have a friend who owns several accessible apartments in Traverse City," he explained. "One is vacant right now, and she is willing to let you stay there at reduced rent until you get back on your feet. It is not charity," he added, seeing my hesitation. "Just a helping hand when you need it most." With few options and a desperate need for stability, I accepted the offer. Social services helped with the initial arrangements, providing emergency funds for basic necessities and connecting me with local disability support resources. The day before my discharge, Detective Lindsay visited with an update on the case. "Both your mother and Kyle are being held without bail," she informed me. "The prosecutor is pursuing maximum charges given the premeditation and the vulnerability factor. Mr. Gardner's photographs have been invaluable evidence." "Will I have to testify?" I asked, my stomach nodding at the thought of facing Patricia across a courtroom. "Eventually, yes," Detective Lindsay nodded. "But we have months of preparation before the trial. You will be well supported through the process." As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "One more thing, Miss Taylor. We found some interesting information while investigating Kyle's background. He has a history of insurance fraud, and it seems he recently convinced your mother to take out a substantial life insurance policy on you. The policy had a special clause covering accidental death." The revelation sent ice through my veins. It had not just been about getting rid of a burden. They had planned to profit from my death. That night alone in my hospital room, I finally allowed myself to fully process everything that had happened. My own mother had not just abandoned me. She had actively planned my murder for financial gain. The depth of that betrayal was almost incomprehensible. Yet somehow, through a series of unlikely events, a wildlife photographer had been in exactly the right place at the right time to witness and document the crime. Without Michael's photographs, Patricia and Kyle might have succeeded in their plan or at least escaped justice. As painful as the truth was knowing, it gave me a strange sense of peace. The uncertainty was gone. The years of gaslighting, of being made to feel like a burden, were exposed for what they truly were: the psychological groundwork for a terrible crime. I was not the problem. I never had been. 3 months after my abandonment in the woods, I was settled in a small but accessible apartment in Traverse City. The place was on the first floor of a renovated Victorian house with wide doorways, a roll-in shower, and other modifications that made it comfortable for someone in a wheelchair. My new address was completely unknown to Patricia, who remained in jail awaiting trial. Those first months of independence were challenging but liberating. With help from various social services, I secured disability benefits that provided a modest income. Jennifer visited when she could, helping me furnish the apartment with secondhand furniture and essential items. Michael, whose cabin was only an hour away, became a regular presence in my life, offering practical assistance and, more importantly, friendship without pity. Therapy became a cornerstone of my new routine. Twice-weekly sessions with Dr. Ellis, a trauma specialist, helped me begin processing the profound betrayal and abandonment I had experienced. The progress was not linear: good days interspersed with devastating setbacks when memories would overwhelm me unexpectedly. Recovery is not about forgetting what happened, Dr. Ellis explained during one particularly difficult session. It is about integrating the experience into your life story without letting it define your entire identity or future. Those words resonated deeply, becoming something of a mantra as I worked to rebuild my life from the fragments Patricia had left behind. As the trial date approached, I began meeting with Laura Davis, the prosecutor assigned to my case. She was a petite woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that I found reassuring. She did not sugarcoat the challenges ahead. "The defense will try to paint your mother as overwhelmed by the burden of caring for you," she warned during our first meeting. "They will seek sympathy, suggest that she had a mental breakdown. Our job is to show the premeditation, the cold calculation behind what she did." "Will I have to see her?" I asked, the thought sending a chill through me despite the warm summer day. "Yes," Laura confirmed, "but we will prepare you thoroughly. You will know exactly what to expect, and I will be right beside you the entire time." The preparation was grueling. Laura and her team conducted mock cross-examinations, asking the most painful questions imaginable to ensure I was ready for whatever the defense might throw at me. We reviewed the evidence countless times: photographs, medical reports, financial records, showing the insurance policy taken out just weeks before my abandonment. Jennifer became my rock during this period, staying with me the week before the trial was set to begin. We reconnected in a way we had not since before my accident, staying up late, talking about everything, and nothing, finding moments of laughter amid the stress and fear. "Remember Michelle Gordon from high school?" she asked one evening as we shared pizza on my small patio. "She saw the news about your case and reached out to me. She is organizing a group of our old classmates to attend the trial and support. People care, Sarah, more than you know." The realization that I was not as alone as I had believed was overwhelming. For years, Patricia had systematically isolated me, convincing me that I was a burden to everyone, that no one would want me in their lives. Learning that people from my past were rallying around me challenged that narrative in the most healing way. As my confidence grew, I made a decision that surprised even me. I began writing about my experience, not just in my private journal, but in essays intended for others to read. The words flowed easily, years of bottled emotions finding release on the page. Writing had always been my dream, and now it became my therapy, my voice, my way of reclaiming power. Michael, who had connections in the publishing world through his photography career, read my first completed essay and immediately suggested submitting it to an online magazine focused on disability issues. To my amazement, they accepted it within days, praising its raw honesty and powerful message about familial abuse of vulnerable individuals. 2 weeks before the trial, Patricia attempted to contact me. A letter arrived at my attorney's office, as my address was confidential. Laura called to inform me before showing me its contents. "You do not have to read it," she assured me. "It is entirely your choice." "I want to know what she has to say," I decided after a moment's consideration. The letter was manipulative, filled with excuses and subtle blame shifting. Patricia claimed she had been not in her right mind, that the stress of caring for me had broken something inside her. She expressed remorse not for what she had done but for how things had turned out, as if my abandonment had been some unfortunate accident rather than a calculated attempt on my life. The final paragraph revealed her true purpose. "If you could find it in your heart to forgive me, to tell the judge that you do not want me to go to prison, I know we could start fresh somewhere. I am still your mother, Sarah. Blood is thicker than water." I handed the letter back to Laura, a strange calm settling over me. She still does not see me as a person, I observed, just a tool to use for her benefit. First, I was a burden to discard. Now I am a potential character witness to exploit. "Would you like to respond?" Laura asked. "No," I said firmly. "I will say what I need to say in court where the world can hear it." The morning of the trial arrived with a media circus surrounding the courthouse. My story had captured public attention, the details too shocking to ignore. Patricia Taylor, the mother who had abandoned her disabled daughter in the wilderness to die, was now facing justice, and everyone wanted a glimpse of the drama. Michael arranged for me to enter through a private entrance, shielding me from the cameras and shouted questions. Jennifer and a small group of former classmates were already inside, occupying a row of seats directly behind where I would be sitting. Their presence gave me strength as I wheeled myself into position. And then Patricia was there, being led into the courtroom, in handcuffs and a jail jumpsuit. She looked smaller somehow, her once carefully maintained appearance now plain and institutional. Our eyes met across the room, and I forced myself to hold her gaze steadily, refusing to show the turmoil her presence created within me. The trial proceeded with opening statements, the prosecution laying out the calculated nature of the crime, the defense suggesting temporary insanity brought on by caregiver stress. I listened to both sides describe my life, my value, my relationship with the woman who had given birth to me, as if these were abstract concepts rather than the painful reality I had lived. When it was my turn to testify, Laura helped me navigate my wheelchair to the witness stand. Under her gentle questioning, I recounted the events leading up to my abandonment in clear, factual terms. I described the drugged water, the remote location, Patricia's cold words as she left me to die. My voice remained steady even as I detailed the night spent alone in the forest, my certainty that I would not survive until morning. The defense attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit, attempted to paint Patricia as a devoted mother pushed beyond her limits. His questions were designed to make me appear demanding, to suggest that years of caregiving had driven Patricia to a breaking point where she was no longer responsible for her actions. "Miss Taylor," he asked with false sympathy, "would you say your condition required significant care from your mother over the years?" "My disability required some accommodations," I replied carefully, "but I was largely independent. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry. I maintained excellent grades despite missing school for medical appointments. I applied for college scholarships to ease financial pressure." "But surely, the emotional toll on your mother was substantial," he pressed. I looked directly at Patricia before answering. The emotional toll was substantial for both of us. The difference is that I did not respond by attempting murder for insurance money. A murmur ran through the courtroom, and the judge called for order. The defense attorney's expression tightened as he realized I would not be easily manipulated into providing excuses for Patricia's actions. After 3 days of testimony, including Michael's powerful account of witnessing and documenting the abandonment, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a verdict guilty on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 8 years in prison for attempted murder, with additional time for child abandonment, insurance fraud, and other related charges. As she was led from the courtroom, Patricia looked back at me one last time. I wheeled myself forward, needing to say something I had rehearsed countless times in my mind. "You chose to stop being my mother," I said, my voice clear in the now silent courtroom. "But I choose to stop being your victim. I survived not just the forest, but every day you made me feel worthless. That ends today." The words were not just for her, but for myself, a declaration of independence from the narrative she had constructed around my disability and worth. As she disappeared through the door to return to jail, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, not completely gone, but lighter than it had been in years. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by Jennifer, Michael, and unexpected supporters, I faced the media briefly. Rather than focusing on Patricia, I spoke about disability rights, the isolation many disabled individuals face, and the need for better support systems and oversight to prevent similar situations. In the months that followed, my article about the experience was republished in several major publications, bringing attention not just to my case, but to the broader issues it represented. I received messages from other disabled individuals who had experienced family abuse, many thanking me for giving voice to a reality often hidden from public view. With Michael's encouragement, I applied for a grant to start a small organization providing resources and advocacy for disabled individuals facing family rejection or abuse. To my amazement, the application was successful, providing seed funding for what would become my life's work. My friendship with Michael deepened as we collaborated on a photo essay series about disabled individuals living full, independent lives. His artistic eye, combined with my words, created powerful narratives that challenged stereotypes and assumptions. Somewhere along the way, our professional partnership began to evolve into something more personal, though both of us moved cautiously, aware of the complex circumstances that had brought us together. "You know," he said one evening as we watched the sunset from my patio, "when I first saw your mother abandoning you in those woods, I never imagined that terrible moment would lead to something good. Not just your survival, but everything you have created from that experience." "I never imagined it either," I admitted. "But rebuilding my life on my own terms has been the most empowering thing I have ever done. I had survived not just a night in the forest, but the systematic dismantling of my self-worth by the person who should have protected me most. And in that survival, I had found a strength and purpose I never knew I possessed." 2 years after the trial that sent Patricia to prison, my life had transformed in ways I could never have anticipated on that terrifying night in the forest. My small apartment had been exchanged for a fully accessible condo with wide hallways, lowered countertops, and a view of Grand Traverse Bay that never failed to inspire me. The down payment had come from my portion of the proceeds from the sale of our family home, which the court had ruled belonged partially to me, despite Patricia's attempts to claim it all. My organization, New Foundations, had grown from a one-person operation run from my living room to a proper nonprofit with 3 part-time staff members and a network of volunteers. We provided resources, legal advocacy, and emergency housing for disabled individuals facing family rejection or abuse. Every success story, every person who found safety and support through our services, felt like a personal victory against the darkness Patricia had tried to consign me to. Writing had become not just a passion, but a profession. My articles on disability rights appeared regularly in national publications, and I was working on a memoir about my experience. The advance from the publisher had been modest, but affirming concrete evidence that my voice mattered, that my story had value. Michael had become a constant in my life, our relationship evolving naturally from friendship to romance. He understood the trauma I carried, never pushed when I needed space, and celebrated every milestone in my healing journey. His work as a wildlife photographer still took him away periodically, but he always returned with new stories and images to share, bringing the beauty of the natural world back to me. The wolves have had cubs, he announced, showing me photographs from his latest expedition. The pack has grown. They are thriving despite all the challenges they face. Like us, I smiled, taking his hand. Our relationship was not without complications. Michael sometimes struggled with guilt about not reaching me sooner that night in the forest, while I occasionally battled irrational fears that he would eventually tire of my disability, my emotional baggage. But we talked through these issues openly, each conversation bringing us closer, stronger. Jennifer remained my closest friend, now living just an hour away after taking a teaching position at a local community college. She had been instrumental in helping me reconnect with old classmates and build a social circle that accepted me completely, disability and all. Weekend gatherings, book clubs, and impromptu dinner parties had become regular features of my life, filling it with the genuine connections Patricia had always tried to prevent. 6 months earlier, I had made the difficult decision to visit Patricia in prison, not for reconciliation, but for closure. The meeting had been brief and tense, conducted across a table in a sterile visiting room under the watchful eyes of corrections officers. Patricia had aged significantly in prison, her once carefully colored hair now showing substantial gray, her face lined with stress. She had attempted contrition, expressing what sounded like rehearsed remorse, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the continued belief that she could manipulate me if she found the right approach. "I forgive you," I had told her, cutting off her practice speech. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I am not carrying the weight of hatred anymore. It does not mean I want you in my life now, or ever. It means I am free of you." She had not taken that well, her mask of remorse slipping to reveal the anger beneath. But it did not matter. I had said what I needed to say, set the boundaries I needed to set. I left the prison that day feeling lighter, more complete somehow. The healing process had not been linear. There were still nights when I woke in a cold sweat, convinced I was back in those woods alone and abandoned. There were days when trusting anyone, even Michael or Jennifer, felt impossible, but these moments had become less frequent, less overwhelming, as I built a life filled with purpose and genuine connection. Therapy continued to be an essential part of my routine, though now reduced to monthly sessions. Dr. Ellis had helped me recognize that healing did not mean forgetting or minimizing what had happened, but rather integrating it into my life story without letting it define my entire identity. "You have done remarkably well," she observed during a recent session. "Many people would have remained trapped in anger and victimhood after such a profound betrayal. You have transformed your trauma into purpose." I had help, I acknowledged. Michael, Jennifer, the community that formed around me. I could not have done it alone. Accepting help is its own kind of strength, she reminded me, especially for someone whose trust was so fundamentally violated. That lesson, the value of accepting help without shame, had been perhaps the most difficult for me to learn. Patricia had spent years conditioning me to see myself as a burden, to believe that needing assistance made me less worthy of love and respect. Unlearning that toxic message had taken conscious effort and constant reinforcement from the healthy relationships I now cultivated. My work with New Foundations brought me into contact with many others struggling with similar issues, individuals who had been made to feel worthless because of their disabilities, who had been abused or neglected by those meant to care for them. Helping them recognize their inherent value became a central focus of our programs. Family is supposed to be about love and support, I often told our clients. If your biological family cannot provide that, you have every right to create a chosen family who will. Blood does not define who deserves a place in your life. This philosophy guided my own relationships as well. The community I had built around me, diverse in background but united in genuine care and respect, had become the family I chose. Michael, Jennifer, my colleagues at the foundation, the support group members who had become friends, all formed a network of connection that Patricia had tried to convince me was impossible for someone with my disability. The most profound lesson I had learned, the one I shared in speeches and articles and quiet conversations with those still struggling, was about the nature of worthiness itself. Worth was not conditional on ability, productivity, or convenience to others. It was inherent, unchangeable, a birthright that no one, not even a parent, had the power to revoke. "We are not burdens," I wrote in the conclusion of my forthcoming memoir. "We are human beings deserving of dignity, respect, and love. Our value does not diminish because we need accommodations or assistance. Anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is revealing their own limitations, not yours." This understanding had fundamentally changed how I viewed myself and my disability. What Patricia had seen as a burden to be eliminated, I now recognized as simply one aspect of my complex, valuable self. My partial paralysis affected how I navigated the world, but it did not define my worth or limit my capacity for contribution, connection, and joy. On the second anniversary of my rescue from the forest, Michael and I held a small gathering at my condo. Jennifer was there, along with colleagues from the foundation, friends from my support group, and even Detective Lindsay, who had kept in touch long after the trial concluded. As we shared food and conversation, looking out over the bay as the sun set in brilliant oranges and pinks, I was struck by the fullness of my life, the depth of connection I now experienced. Patricia had tried to end my story in those dark woods, but instead she had inadvertently set me on a path to a more authentic, purposeful existence than I had ever imagined possible. To survival, Michael toasted, raising his glass, and to building something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. To chosen family, I added, looking around at the faces of those who had proven that love could be found in unexpected places, that community could form around shared values rather than shared DNA. As conversations flowed around me, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The path had been unimaginably painful at times, marked by betrayal and abandonment that still sometimes haunted my dreams. But it had also been illuminated by surprising kindness, by the steadfast support of both old friends and new connections who saw my value when I struggled to see it myself. The most powerful revelation, the one that continued to guide my healing and my work with others, was that surviving abandonment had not just been about physical endurance in those woods. It had been about refusing to accept the narrative Patricia had tried to impose on me, about recognizing that her cruelty reflected her limitations, not my worth. In choosing who became my family, in building a life defined by purpose and genuine connection rather than obligation and resentment, I had found a freedom that Patricia, for all her scheming to escape responsibility, would never know. True liberation came not from abandoning difficult relationships, but from creating healthy ones based on mutual respect and care. That night, surrounded by my chosen family, I silently thanked the wildlife photographer who had been in exactly the right place at the right time, whose compassion and quick thinking had given me the chance to discover these truths. Without Michael's intervention, Patricia's plan might have succeeded. Instead, her attempt to end my story had merely opened a new, more authentic chapter. Have you ever had to build a chosen family when your biological one failed you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if this story touched you, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their inherent worth today. Remember, sometimes our greatest strength is revealed in our most vulnerable moments. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to create the connections that will help you thrive.